James. Thank you so much again to all of my panelists in this working group session for your opening provocations. Um, and perhaps this is one of these first questions when we consider the move from discriminative models to language models to agentic AI systems. What principles do you find yourself most challenged by in terms of the responsible AI ethics space when it comes to applications like the engineering field, like the healthcare field, and for instance facial recognitions and across different applications and industries. So that would be my first sort of question to you, if anyone wants to answer this, and then what are some of the what are some of the features that we would want to see in what are the features that are desirable in these increasingly personalized, increasingly agentic models that are supposed to support this human AI partnership, this human AI collaboration in a way that optimizes for the skills and capabilities of both parties, and how can we move beyond what happened with recommender systems and the effect of echo chambers, of us becoming an increasingly individualistic society, and really taking care of our societies as a whole. So just these questions, you might pick one or the other or both, and then we'll move on to more of this interdisciplinary collaboration. Question, Vincent.
Yeah, I'll try to jump in. So I think one issue is, as you point out, this is such a multifaceted space. And I think, maybe about 10 years ago or so, I would have advocated for thinking, application by application or issue by issue, right? That AI in the military is something very different from when we use it for employment purposes, and when we use it in medicine. Each of those things has their own separate concerns, and we should think about those separately. And I think one of the issues with foundation models is that we cannot necessarily think about them separately. As Jimmy pointed out, we might have downstream users that want to use it for one purpose or another. Now, ideally, as a downstream user, as maybe a company that's working in some particular vertical, you would like to, in some sense, know something about the behavior of this general foundation model. But it seems to me very difficult to get across the right kind of information, right? And if we think about aligning these systems, I think there's still a big gap between how we think about aligning them today through methods such as RLHF, when often we have something like a chatbot in mind. It's not clear that that is going to work well downstream. A somewhat related issue that I see is the notion of agents, which I've been a multi-agent systems researcher since 2001. The idea of an agent is an old one in the field of AI. But I do think that the current developments are in some sense also putting pressure on the model of an agent in the first place, right? It's sort of a conceptually nice fiction, and I think is useful for many purposes, but it's not always clear where an agent begins and ends, right? And I think this is even true for sort of pre-frontier model systems. Even if you think about Siri or something on people's phones, uh, if you have Siri running on your phone, do you have your own assistant, your own agent? Is that separate from Siri running on other people's phones on servers? You could ask the question. I like to do this at talks these days. How many agents is Siri? And I usually give a number of different options, anything from, 500 million or however many Siri users there are, to the whole thing is one agent, to it's not even an agent, it's zero agents. The question is not well posed. And just about every audience I've done this with, I get a remarkably equal split across those answers, right? Which suggests that at some level, maybe we sometimes aim towards building agents, but when we see real deployed systems, they aren't necessarily that easily divisible into agents. It's also not necessarily clear that you would want it to be, right? That maybe there are some good aspects to the fact that these systems are potentially very unlike us with potentially very unclear boundaries. There are challenges with that, certainly, thinking how we think about those systems and what kind of behavior we would like to see from them. We're used to thinking about relatively separate entities, and we have legal and other mechanisms for getting those to behave. Um, in some ways, there are advantages to AI agents being different from how we are. For example, you can run them in simulation and see if they behave as expected. I think that there is sort of a challenge with that these days, that the systems might start to be aware of the fact that they're being tested and so behave differently. That's the kind of challenge that actually here we have a position paper at NeurIPS on this particular issue. But we also should, I think, be mindful of the way that these systems, even if they're agenting in the sense that they're taking actions in the world, aren't exactly like the traditional agents we've had in mind, where they have very clear boundaries and we can, point out that this one is separate from that one. It may not shake out that way for all kinds of reasons, some good, some bad. So I want to make sure we're aware of that as well. There's some interesting conceptual, even philosophical aspects of how should we think about agents. What does it mean to be agentic? What does it mean to be an agent? And I think if we're not clear on those, we may work ourselves towards a future that isn't the best one.
Thank you so much, Vincent. Jimmy?
Thanks, Vincent. Thanks, Amanda. Yeah, I definitely won't comment on the first question on the limitations in like specific sectors, engineering, health, and stuff. This definitely the other panelists could talk about more, I think. On the second one, I want to say regarding human AI collaboration, there's something a bit concerning happening on the EU level. Is that the Commission, in the interest of simplifying regulations, has released a digital omnibus, which is basically a proposed simplification of a bunch of EU laws, including the GDPR and the AI Act. And unfortunately, one aspect of the AI Act that has become a casualty of this proposal, that is not finalized but has been proposed, is Article 4 on AI literacy, and this is essential uh, for human AI collaboration. Basically, the article suggests that deployers of AI systems, companies, need to give their employees some level of AI literacy training to get them up to speed on how to use these models and what are the limitations and this sort of thing. But this is seen as too burdensome for companies, so this is the proposal is to remove this. There's still a chance for member states and the parliament to push back on this. So for folks working on this space, that's something to flag. On the third question of how to move away from issues potentially that happened with social media in terms of like echo chambers and like access to information, these sorts of things. I think the key issue here is that these AI models really are still black boxes. These frontier models that are now being deployed, for example, Gemini 3, have a parameter count of 10 trillion, which, of course, the comparison to our own brains is not perfect, but someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think our brains have roughly 10 billion neurons. So really like orders of magnitude lower than the number of parameters in these frontier models, which means that any sort of study to interpret what's going on inside them, there have been experiments with fields like mechanistic interpretability that are seemingly less promising now. It's almost impossible to understand what's really happening inside of them. So this sort of black box infrastructure that results in information coming out from which we don't know where it's come from, we don't know what data it's been trained on, that is a problem. And this sort of like future AI vision that a lot of AI companies are working towards. What comes to mind is, for example, Meta with their AI glasses, where you will basically be constantly interacting with your own personal AI assistant. Is basically a continuation from where previously, Google search had a lot of power to show you to rank certain information streams and websites based on what was optimal for them. But of course, you still ended up accessing the information from the source. So you could click on the website, you could see where it was coming from. But this future scenario where AI is just constantly giving you a stream of information and it's highly personalized, this is a really a much further black box scenario where you don't even know where the information is coming from, and it is completely being dictated to you by one of these companies. I think the last thing I would say is that in this sort of early AI era where there are hundreds of $billions going into capital expenditure and valuations, and there are potential concerns of a bit of a bubble because a business model hasn't really been figured out yet. This is a crucial moment to kind of shape the industry in the right direction to make sure that it doesn't go in the same direction as previous business models in terms of purely advertising based, where the user has very little agency as to what they receive, and it's optimized for addictive tendencies and these sorts of things. So I think this period, like while the business models are being adapted and developed, is really crucial to prevent such a echo chamber black box scenario in the future. Yeah.
Thank you, Jimmy, for that reflection. And this does remind me of these cases where, because a lot of these industries are so profit driven, maximizing for user attention is a common theme. Maximizing for user reliance on these platforms is quite common. But the two things that maybe Conrad and Asha, you might also touch upon as you're responding to these questions is, for instance, the principle of transparency, of explainability that is increasingly difficult when these systems become more compound and more complex. And also the role of it in the human AI partnerships as decision support systems. There was quite a lot of critique coming out lately around how language models are being used to support decision making, even in areas like Parliament, and this is something that would be quite interesting to hear your thoughts as experts on how what's the correct relationship, this attitude that we should have towards these models. Conrad, over to you.
Thank you, Amanda. So I guess one of the challenges is that many of these models are probabilistic in nature. So given a prompt, what is the most likely next word, and so on. And in my intervention, I gave the example of the aerospace and engineering community and how we developed an entire industry around that. And it's interesting that if we draw a parallel in the aviation industry, which is extremely well regulated, um, if if and when there's an anomalous event, there's a deep dive in understanding what happened in order to ensure that it doesn't happen again. Um, and it's really first principles approach to designing systems. And when we draw a parallel with our AI community, it seems like what we're learning, let's say we're trying to learn the concept of gravity. So we throw something up, we observe it falling down, and we collect a bunch of data and understand this pattern. That's different from having an actual equation that um, connects the relationship with force, mass, and acceleration. And the challenge with learning from data, let's take gravity, you could throw something up and down millions or billions of times on Earth, and you think you have a good understanding of that relationship, and then you find yourself in a space shuttle, and then you see things floating, or in a vacuum, and you see things falling at the same time. And so, what the hope is, where we really go is understanding the fundamental causal relationships between input and output. And it seems as though we're fine with kind of learning and figuring as we go along. And I'm glad that's not how the aviation industry evolved. Imagine just prototyping planes and learning from experience. Related to your question, I think that these issues of explainability and fairness are very difficult because the models themselves are learning from this probabilistic viewpoint and approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Conrad, for sharing your thoughts on this. Etche, I will go over to you.
Thank you. Just a few thoughts. I really believe that we will need, in addition to evaluating this technology generally, there are specific domains in which we need careful investigation in line with the characteristics of those domains. The one example I would like to give is mental health. We are seeing many examples that users are using these chatbots as a mental health solution, although they are not created for it. I have met people that are spending 6, 7 hours a day talking to a chatbot and sharing their perceived experience that they actually get more value out of talking to a chatbot and getting advice from a chatbot for their mental health than a healthcare professional. Now with Grok, we are actually seeing that in Tesla cars, there is a feature there that people can just do a session with Grok on their mental health. These are things that are happening today. These are not future risks. And we don't have a way of engaging the computer science community, the AI community, with mental health experts to really discuss the change that is happening, how people are using this, and what needs to be done around this. I think it's going to be important to identify a few key domains in which we can actually do these deep dives and do more specific investigation of AI's use in those domains. Because again, as Vincent said, these are general purpose technologies, so they are applicable to anything and people are using it for anything. And that's just the reality of our current state. With respect to the move to agents and chatbots with memory, we are going to be having these systems that are going to be continually learning. They are going to be learning from the experience that they are having with individual users. Memory is just a subset of that self-learning that will be happening in these systems. It's going to be really important to think how having that continual learning, personalization, and memory, how that's going to be affecting the risk surface. Again, the thing about memory or learning is stickiness, the relationship. Having, for example, these chatbots or agents, whichever way we are calling them, building a relationship with a user, being able to recall past conversations and using them potentially as part of the manipulation or convincing of the user. I really think that requires some careful thinking as these technologies are coming up. In my experience, I don't find model parameters as a good indicator of AI capabilities at all. And there are two reasons for it. One of them is that, especially with the work we've been doing on small model distillation, we can actually get a very large model, especially around a particular capability, and distill it to a model that is much smaller in size. So the risks that we are seeing in frontier models is just a matter of time that those same risks are going to be replicating at a model that is much smaller in size. And we've been seeing many examples of this. Second, when we are building AI systems and capabilities, we are no longer only prompting the models. We are orchestrating. We are adding memory, we are adding learning on top of it and many other things, which means that the capability can be much beyond the model capabilities in reality as we are orchestrating these pieces together in a complete stack. So if we are really evaluating what AI capabilities look like, it needs to be around the capabilities of the stack rather than the individual models. I wanna second something Jimmy said around revenue and incentives as an important part of this equation. There is very much a growing tension around the big investment and the return of investment that is going to be pushing many of these companies that are investing crazy amounts of money to figure out faster ways of getting revenue. We are already getting signs of incorporating advertisement and then market models. That I think is going to be very, very important. And finally, as Vincent said before, these ideas, many of these technologies and ideas are not new. They are just finding a new life with a new computing stack that is arising on top of foundation models. And again, in many ways, there is no need to reinvent the wheel, but we need to find a way of translating ideas from the past and bringing them to these new stack, and also realize that many of the things we are dealing with right now are not new. I'm in conversations where I'm seeing product groups, for example, reinventing human in the loop as a new concept. There is so much research that is talking about, you know, the complexities of having human in the loop, but I'm not really seeing that being part of the conversation. Everybody's treating these as complete and brand new ideas. So as a final thought, I think we need to also find ways of educating the community around the decades of really important research that has been done around many things that are becoming top of mind again.
Thank you so much, Eshe, for this response, and I will pass on to you, Vincent, in just 1 second. I was just you have reminded me, Eshe, of this sort of ongoing sort of discussion that is around training models, retraining, distilling models, especially, and fine-tuning models. In an era where the internet is increasingly proliferated with AI-generated output, what some people call AI slop, I was wondering whether there's something that you can share with us and any of the speakers really about some of the challenges in sort of creating the next generation of responsible AI frontiers. Because of this issue of retraining and AI generated output being out there, and any sort of strategies that you think we should be exploring. And the two other issues that also actually you have touched upon in your opening intervention is this issue of multidisciplinary collaboration. If you have any thoughts about what has worked well in your space, in your context, regarding bringing different stakeholders from different disciplines together. And finally, this issue of translational ethics, of how do we any insights into translating principles into practice, whether that's metrics, sandboxes, playbooks. These are some of the things that have been emerging code of practice. What are some of these things that you think could be worth taking away from the session today in terms of these three in these three areas? I don't know, Vincent, if you want to finish your thought before we move on to these questions.
Yes, I'm trying to do one thought at a time. First of all, I couldn't resist. Sorry, I was on mute. One thought at a time, but I just got this nice little sticker at the conference of Human in the Loop, so couldn't resist showing that. Um, I just wanted to come back to mental health, which of course is a very important issue, but there are other interesting phenomena happening there as well. AI psychosis came up earlier. Miles Klee from Rolling Stone recently did a very interesting article on communities of people that try to engage with these models in different ways, that they believe they have sort of secret prompts to unlock particular kinds of behavior, and they feel that they form a dyad together with their unlocked model. Doesn't to me seem all based in reality, but I think it also relates to AJ's comments about the stack. And in some sense, the stack is not just under the control of the model providers, right? It's actually fairly easy with many of these models to build other things around them. And it's, so it's not clear that we have the control over that. I think people will start to use them in different types of ways. You can set these things up in a variety of ways. And of course, in some sense, also, that's where a lot of the recent progress has come from, right? As AJ points out, that recently, I would say relatively more of the process has come from the reasoning models, and just more generally, how do you set up these systems in a way that they provide better results of some sort or another. I think that poses a whole bunch of additional challenges that maybe the EU AI Act and even the Code of Practice maybe haven't completely foreseen. And so, yeah, it just gets back to AJ's comment of like things keep moving, and yeah, it's hard to keep up. There are maybe also potential avenues there for making things go better if we set up the stack in the right way. Okay, now back to your question, but I will have to think about that one.
No worries at all. Thanks, Vincent. And I think it's a really important issue that you have reminded me of as well. Is the issue of that healthy interaction also of users to these systems and the impact that it can have on the mental health of individuals. We've seen some really hard cases in the States, several suicide, either attempts or committed suicide, and the impact of language models creating these echo chambers again in a much more personalized, much more therapeutic sense as well. We've got this and this. It came not long ago. The top use cases for language models was therapy and companionship, which for me is very concerning in our society already, as lonely as it can be, and individualistic. So yes, I mean, if any of the other speakers wants to touch upon this, and perhaps also where the policy side of things sits in this area, I think Jimmy, you're the expert on this panel regarding the sort of more of this multilateral, but also Conrad, you can share your thoughts perhaps on this. Are these points even considered at the moment in these discussions and this dialogue? And any of the other questions around the AI slop or training, tension, this multidisciplinary collaboration, or the translation from principles into practice, anything that you think could be considered as good practice, if not best practice, anything that you think held well in your context and could be taken forward. Jimmy.
Yeah, I can briefly comment on the sort of companionship slash child safety aspects of AI regulation around the world. I honestly think, seeing some of the names in this call, there are also a lot of other people that could definitely share some really good things on this. So in terms of the AI Act and the Code of Practice, like it's a product safety regulation, so it's not super well equipped to be, for example, like a child safety regulation. There are requirements in the AI Act on stuff like CSAM, so child sexual abuse material, and this is also covered by a bunch of other digital laws. But one thing that I would say is that the sort of salience of child safety in relation to AI safety and AI ethics has really raised in the last year because of these stories of companionship, and also stuff like CSAM and deepfakes and child sexual abuse material. So this is like definitely coming into the conversation more and more. I think actually not the EU is sort of making the most progressive steps on this, but Australia, which is actually my other home country, just passed a social media ban for under 16-year-olds. So of course this is like not fully connected to AI, but quite tangentially related. And in the US as well, the policy discourse has really raised on child safety, and it was one of the main reasons why an attempt for the preemption of state laws regulating AI in the US was blocked. So a few times the Trump administration has attempted basically to preempt state laws and say that for a set amount of time, before it was 10 years, that there wouldn't be any state laws on AI as it should be regulated at a federal level, and they're still figuring out how that should be done. This was basically prevented because of child safety concerns and some others. So yeah, child safety is definitely becoming more and more important. I'm not in the best position to talk about this. I don't want to talk for OpenAI, but they have also brought in some new measures for child safety. So from my understanding, basically users under a certain age need to be connected to some sort of parent account. There's some difficulties with how to verify who that parent is because you're not like uploading birth certificates to show that you are the parent, but that parent definitely needs to be above 18. And then if a prompt or an input suggests stuff like suicide and self-harm, then OpenAI is notified, obviously, and the parent or sort of guardian is also notified, and there are some processes being put in place there. So this is also happening on the company side in reaction to the recent stories that have come out. Of course, I will always say that that's great, but it needs to be sort of a standard and done on the level of regulation. But some initial steps are being taken.
Thank you, Jimmy, for these thoughts. And as you mentioned, the standardization of some responsible AI safeguards and measures is still a question that we're tackling. I think there are some common principles that have been spoken about and have been shared for a long time, and a lot of the Swiss discussions I've been involved in say that we don't need and we don't want any more principles or like these general meta level frameworks, but what we want is operationalization of these principles into practice, and how do we take them to shape our architectures, our systems that are social technical. Conrad, if you are happy to share your thoughts, I know you have to leave soon.
Thank you. So I think the regulation and policy is definitely a critical dimension, but we also may want to invest in educating the general population in the same way that we've done with, smoking campaigns, or I mean, no smoking campaigns, alcohol campaigns, because if the general population is not well informed of the potential risks, then putting a majority of the onus on either the companies or governments may be an uphill battle. How many people understand the mental health issues when they interact with an AI agent for an extended period of time? Or how many studies exist that have documented the adverse mental health effects that are then communicated and disseminated to the general public? So our hope is in the very short term that we expand the number of people who are part of these conversations so that we have, your average individual anywhere in the world understanding the potential adverse effects of prolonged use of AI in a certain way, in the same way they understand the effects of smoking. On the topic of moving forward and what can we do, I think we can learn from best practices. So again, hate to keep going back to the engineering examples, but your modern day aircraft has 5 to 6 million parts. How is it that we're able to pin down the root cause to a almost certainty every single time when there's an adverse effect, and sometimes taking the draconian step of grounding an entire class of aircraft? This is an industry that at the foundation was built upon safety first. So we know how to do this in other industries. And maybe the challenge with AI is because the potential adverse effects aren't as singular and visible as when there's an aircraft incident, and that is very visible. There's maybe one mental health effect in one part of the country or another part of the world. It's not hundreds of people being affected at the same time. And so maybe these are some of the issues as to why we haven't mobilized in the same way that we've mobilized in other industries. But it's not too late. I mean, we have the tools to do that now. These conversations are absolutely critical. And so thank you for bringing together such a diverse group of experts. And what happens next is really key in terms of advocacy and educating the general population. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Conrad, for that. And thank you so much for your participation. I think it's a really valuable point that you made. Sometimes we say, because this model has X billion parameters, and you're sharing with us, even though you have 6 million parts in an aircraft, you're still able to dissect where the provenance of the particular issue relies on. And because it is so visible, so transparent as to when these serious incidents occur, we have this motivation to come back and even ground certain classes of aircraft models. This really resembles for me a really beautiful metaphor, even though I know that mechanistic interpretability is a bit sort of in its infancy around the reasoning of these models as well. We're slowly building up the field there and investing our efforts into understanding what's happening under the hood of these particular models. So thank you, Conrad, so much. And we will do a round of responses to each other's comments on these final few points before we share a closing statement by each of the speaker. Thank you, Conrad, once again. I'm not sure if anyone is keen to go first. Vincent, Etche, Jimmy, Etche, off you go.
No, I think there are two things that is really important to reflect on in terms of the state of the technology. One of them is the incredible speed. I think that is the thing that is hardest for me in this space, that things are changing so fast. And especially as we are talking about responsibility and ethics, how do we actually do valuable change in the practice while things are moving so fast? I think that's like a key question that I'm really grappling with. And the second one is the very large, almost unbounded application surface that these technologies enable. I think those two factors, like how big of a surface we are talking about, from mental health to manipulation and misinformation to how fast things are changing, that is the challenge of the work we are trying to do here. And I think it's also very important to imagine what these technologies are going to look like. Something I'm spending some time thinking about is, like, we have these really powerful models, a new stack is emerging. There are also new endpoints that are coming up now, that there's going to be a connection to virtual worlds and augmented reality. We are already seeing that the world generation, image generation is going to have a strong connection to influencers and marketing, just to kind of give an example here. So in some way, we need a way of imagining how these puzzle pieces are going to be fitting into together to create new applications, things that we probably haven't even imagined or talked about during these conversations, so that we are not always in the mode of catching up. Because that's how I'm feeling. I feel like technology is going so fast. And as people working on these issues, we're always finding ourselves trying to catch up. And I feel like we need some way of imagining what's going to happen, so that we can at least, like, we are not always in this catching up mode, but we are kind of thinking a bit further and doing the kind of the groundwork before the technology gets there, so that again, we are not always in this catching up mode. So I think we also need to think how we are working as a field around these problems. Because, there has been these things around like, let's pause things for 6 months. That's never going to happen, right? So how do we actually stay ahead instead of trying to catch up, I think is something I'm really thinking about these days.
Thank you, Ache. And I think you have touched upon really a crucial point when it comes to responsible AI is ethical and moral leadership that is visionary. That we have people who have this broad outlook of where are we going, but also where should we be going as a society? Not only what can the technology allow for us to do, what's possible. Vincent, over to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo what AJ said about that. It's the general purposeness of the technology that makes so much of this so hard, that it's hard to catch up with all the different things that people might be doing, right? If the only thing that was being developed was chatbot therapists, then even if that was done with models that are hard to interpret directly, if we hadn't solved mechanistic interpretability, but if that was the only purpose for which it was being used, I think we would have an easier time. Um, there is also relatedly, I think there is an issue of responsibility gaps that we have some entities providing these very general purpose models and then others using them in various ways and creating downstream products that are maybe not what anything that anybody who was involved in providing the general purpose model ever had in mind. And now you get this issue of, who is to blame if something goes wrong. That's, because obviously the way that the general purpose model is and the flaws or that it has will show up downstream as well. And now you get these issues of, well, we never meant for it to be used for that purpose. Um, but once you throw these general purpose models out there, you have limited control over how they will be used. And so I think that's a big challenge as well. That is closely related to the general purpose nature of it, but also the sort of lack of control once it's out there. That we can imagine many good uses potentially of this technology, but it doesn't mean that those will be the only ones that we will see out there. Of course, cyber criminals and other groups will look at any technology and see how they can use it for themselves. Uh, and I think that is sometimes a blind spot that people have who are genuinely concerned about making sure that these technologies are used in a good way, that they can imagine good ways in which it might be used, but they underestimate the ways in which others will use those technologies, and will be much more willing to do certain things that they would have never thought. I think this is to some extent true of the entire AI research community, right? That many of us in our careers as AI researchers were motivated by all the good things that we could do in helping in healthcare and making markets more efficient, all kinds of things. Um, and those things are still real and things that we could potentially be doing. But we haven't always thought about the dual purpose nature of the technology as well.
Thank you so much, Vincent. I think it's really spot on. The difficulties around addressing these systems and these issues is because they are so general purpose. They cut across practically so much, so many of our aspects of our ordinary life, from getting a food recipe to debugging your printer to anything else. I mean, this is some of the things that I've been trying out, but this is not, very, very risky. But on the other hand, we can have people asking for the recipe for a nuclear power bomb and other really bad applications that people are willing to take a step into and to jailbreak the models to infer that sort of information. Jimmy, over to you.
Thanks. Yeah, happy to make a final statement. commenting on a lot of things that some of the other panelists have said. Maybe something that Etcha said, that the size of the model is not a good indicator of risk. This is something that I definitely agree with, and something that the EU AI Act kind of picked a imperfect proxy that was like one of kind of at the time like the best proxy. But this needs to be updated, and this idea that future models could be much smaller with the same risks through methods like distillation is something that is really important for regulation to deal with. There's in the EU, there's unfortunately even talk of raising the compute threshold to 10 to the 26, which would capture even fewer models, and certainly not these distilled models that would carry just as much risk. So this is something that we're working on a little bit. On Conrad's point, like making the comparison to aviation safety, I think of course they are very different, but the comparison is apt because they apply really risk management procedure, and it's clear that the culture between AI and aviation is really different. There are a few reasons why that's the case, but in terms of mitigating risk, the AI industry has a lot to learn from industries like aviation, in which safety culture was really built in from the start. And this is not only the case with the rules and the standards, but also the investment into safety research that is happening. So we see that in the AI industry, the amount of money that is spent on research into AI safety is really minuscule compared to the amount that is spent on pushing the capabilities forward. And this is something that we see is having these real effects where we are still really not very close at all to understanding what is happening under the hood of these really large models. Maybe just a point on Vincent's last point on the fact that this is like these conversations are inherently really difficult because they're general purpose technologies. So if it was just about companionship, this would be easier. I think some framing that I'm increasingly thinking about is that AI is kind of an everything technology. It is being built by companies that are increasingly everything companies, and they need something like everything guardrails. And this is like a very wishy-washy way to say that that the kind of laws and safeguards and standards that are needed to make this technology safe and ethical are going to be really complicated and really complex and detailed, and this is normal. So if a country or a region like the EU is coming out with digital rules to make sure that these are safe, this should be quite unsurprising, let's say. So I think the most important thing for these rules to do are to bring some transparency into the field. This is something that the technology industry has had not much of in the fact that data collection has been really black box, and now AI models, social media algorithms, all these kinds of things are really not very transparent. So a lot of the rules are just about empowering the research community, basically. If there are not going to be as big investments in safety from the companies as there are in pushing capabilities, at least let's engage the massive research community that exists that are ready and able to tackle some of these issues, but are unable to due to basically not being locked out of this transparency because these models are not released open source, and also because they're guarded quite closely. I think final two things, like as AI capabilities develop much faster, that's something we've talked about a lot today. We need to be also ready for the fact that AI capabilities could really go much faster in the near future. This is particularly potentially in the case with automated research and development for AI. So basically, companies using AI to create their next AI models, which speeds up the whole process much quicker. This is something that has certainly not been perfected yet, but that companies are already very much experimenting with. And in terms of having a human in the loop, this is really quite a disaster scenario in terms of engineers will no longer even know how AI models are being created, and this could produce some serious risks. So thinking about how AI development could go in the next few years, we need to also think about potential strong red lines for AI. And this is something that's been talked a lot at the UN recently, that governments need to establish basically, okay, you can have all these risk acceptance thresholds and what kind of risk can we accept, but we need to establish what kind of things can we absolutely not accept. So clear red lines on things like should AIs be allowed to create the next version of themselves and this sort of thing. And then finally, yeah, AI literacy, as I mentioned, this is like kind of a crucial thing across all the conversations we're having. You can have all kinds of rules in place to protect consumers, but at the end of the day, we do have agency as humans. We should have freedom. That's a good thing. So we need to be educated about these products that we use. You know, we have a lot of freedom to buy a car and use it. Of course, there are some rules on the street, but so much of what happens is not subject to those rules. So we have really strict rules on how you get a license and how you learn about car safety and that sort of thing. And the same should apply to AI. So I think final statement to say that AI literacy needs to happen in combination with effective rules. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jimmy. And I will just share a few concluding thoughts before I ask each of you to provide one merit and one misconception to conclude, and your final sentence regarding summing up our roundtable today on optimizing base models for responsible AI progress. We've heard today around the need for interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary collaboration, including those that are affected by frontier AI models across different generations of models, from discriminative to language models to combinations of probabilistic and symbolic models to agentic systems and stacks. We've heard about empowering the research community, pushing when capabilities are being pushed, so that we do not fail to play the catch-up game, but are observant, visionary when and trying to anticipate the risks and the next frontiers of AI models. Remembering that some of these key risks are already emerging, and red lines and specific guardrails should be put in place to make sure that the applications remain cautious of the populations that are interacting with these models that might be out of the intended purpose of these models as well. We've heard about across the panel on the need of our education and AI literacy and critical AI literacy, having a healthy approach towards collaborative work, to partnering as if with AI models, with other teams that are engaging and relying on information that is provided, outputted by models within their limitations and strengths. We saw the merit of learning from different safety critical systems and from across different industries, as we observe AI really proliferating different areas of our everyday today reality. And so I would like to ask you for your final sentence, final thoughts, merits and misconceptions, and any key takeaway for you that maybe you have been struck by, that you would like the audience to take away from this panel. Vincent?
Yeah, I'll go. So for merit, so I think first of all, it's wonderful that we're having these kind of conversations, and I do think even though, as Jimmy points out, there is a lot less funding going into these kind of conversations than in just making various products better. Nevertheless, I do think we make progress. I think, including in regulation, that while it's certainly still flawed in a number of ways, it's an iterative process, and I think we do make some progress that way. Misconceptions, I would say, there I have concerns related to what I was just talking about, but also earlier, that often we have a frame, we have a way that we think about the technology. A company, a provider might think about the thing that they're putting out there in one particular way and have some some idea of what they want the system to be and how they want it to be used. But it may not play out that way. And I think that's something that we need to be more cognizant of. Conversely, I think also on the user's side, often we have this kind of we have an idea that, okay, well, this thing is an assistant to me and it's going to work on my behalf, right? We have that as a goal or a concept of how we expect the thing to work. And that may not be how things play out, right? That may actually not be exactly what is in the company's interest, or for other reasons, it may not be exactly your own personal assistant that helps you in the way that you most want. So I think in general, we also need, and this is tricky, especially in the context of education as well, that uh, it's hard to have the right concepts around all of this, right? And even those of us who, all of us here, were really thinking about all these things a lot. And even still, I think our own concepts are shifting as the technology changes. That makes education hard as well, because it's this constant iteration of figuring out how to even think about these kind of systems as they're changing. That I think is a big challenge.
Thank you, Vincent. Ajay?
Yeah, my positive note is something similar to Vincent, that we've actually came a really long way in building an ecosystem that can now be very effective in taking the charge. I think it's important to acknowledge the progress. Although it may not be the same resourcing as other things, I think the fact that we have these um, many legs of a stool that we can stand on top of, I think is really important, and a different state than where we started this journey. I think it's good to reflect on that. I think the misconception is expecting that with technology improvement, things are just going to work out. I think that's a big misconception.
Thank you so much, Ajay. Jimmy?
Yeah, thanks. Yes, super quick. I would say again, like positively, on the regulation side, like we have some things in place now. So similar to what Etche said for the technology side, we've made some good steps. It's not perfect. It's all about enforcement. How does that actually work? Does it work in practice? Does it exist in an independent rule of law kind of way, or is it mixed up with geopolitical tensions and these kinds of things? That's a big question. Misconception, I would say again, yeah, the same as did I have a misconception? I don't know. I'm blanking right now, but I think I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you, Vincent. Thank you, Eche. Conrad is also sending his regards. Thank you so much for taking part in this brilliant roundtable and for sharing your really great insights from across your disciplines, your expertise, and your fields. Really specific examples that we can take on board as well as we're finalizing and creating a report out of the summit. So thank you so much for your valuable contributions and for responding to all the questions that I have shot at you and you have shot at each other. Yes, I think we will be concluding the roundtable here, and we hope to stay in touch. Please stay connected, and Conrad is also asking likewise to stay connected to continue these conversations going forward. Thank you very much, everyone, for participating, and have a very good day or a good night wherever you are in the world.